Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. We just passed 540 subs. I appreciate your guys' support so much, and I hope I can continue to make great content you guys will enjoy in the future. I hope all you guys had a happy Easter as well, and during Easter and before that, the transfer portal's still been crazy in college basketball. I wanted to cover more of these individually, but with so much going on, I'm giving you guys another transfer portal update of the last few days, and starting with none other than LJ Cryer transferring from the Baylor Bears to the Houston Cougars. This is a huge move because LJ Cryer was one of the best players on the Baylor basketball team. He was a great teammate alongside Keontae George, and you also had Adam Flagler for Baylor this past season. They were a three-headed monster at the guard position. He's leaving Baylor and he's going to the Houston Cougars, who will now be a conference opponent to the Baylor Bears now that Houston's going to the Big 12. So this is huge news all around. LJ Cryer is now going to be a foe to the Baylor Bears playing for Houston, and I think that LJ Cryer could end up being one of the best players on Houston's basketball team. Now that Houston's losing Jarris Walker, Marcus Sasser, and they're losing Tramon Marks to the transfer portal, we'll be getting to him in a minute. You look at LJ Cryer, he can come in and provide some instant offense for Houston. He averaged 15 points per game, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists this past season for Baylor, and he shot 41% from the three-point line. He's only a 6'1" guard, so I do think that he will fill the role of Marcus Sasser, who was the 6'2" league guard for Houston this past season. I think that LJ Cryer should do a really good job with the Houston Cougars. He'll still be in the Big 12, so all the foes will be familiar. He'll just now be playing against his former team, the Baylor Bears. But this is a huge addition for Kelvin Sampson because he needed to replace Marcus Sasser, and I think that this will continue to keep Houston toward the top of college basketball, even though there will be an adjustment period being in the Big 12. Tough loss for Baylor now that they're going to have to be going up against LJ Cryer especially, but this is a really good transfer addition for the Houston Cougars, and I think that LJ Cryer should be one of the best basketball players for Houston next season. Another transfer portal addition is Ace Baldwin Jr. going from Virginia Commonwealth to Penn State. This is not a surprise in any way, shape, or form because Ace Baldwin was the former player for Mike Rhoades at Virginia Commonwealth. Now Mike Rhoades is the new head coach at Penn State, so Ace Baldwin is following Mike Rhoades and going to Penn State as well. Not a shock there. Ace Baldwin averaged 12.7 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, and 5.8 assists per game. So he's a great passing guard. He's 6'1", so he's a really short guard, and he shot 34% from the three-point line this past season. He does need to get better at shooting threes. He is a little bit deficient in that area, but he is capable of being a good three-point shooter, and he does shoot a fairly high volume of threes, so I do think that's why his shooting percentage is a little bit lower than it could be if he took better shots. And now that he's going to be going to Penn State, he might have better teammates around him, and maybe he'll be able to make that shooting percentage a little bit higher. But overall, I think Ace Baldwin Jr. is a fantastic player. It makes complete sense to follow your head coach to Penn State from Virginia Commonwealth because you know his system, and now you're going to be at the Big Ten level. It's going to be a little bit different than playing in the A-10. I think that will be an adjustment period for Ace Baldwin, but he will have better players around him at Penn State. It will be an adjustment period to the Big Ten, but it should help Penn State stay competitive in the Big Ten. I don't know if it will help the Nittany Lions get back to the tournament again now that they're losing Jalen Pickett and Seth Lundy to graduation, and Micah Shrewsbury to Notre Dame, all tough losses for the Nittany Lions program. But Ace Baldwin and Mike Rhoades does stop the bleeding for Penn State and can maybe again keep him competitive in the Big Ten next season. Another transfer portal addition for a big program is Tramon Marks going from the Houston Cougars to the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's a 6'5" guard, and he averages 10 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, and 1.8 assists. That's a tough loss for Kelvin Sampson, losing Tramon Marks. He's a player that you didn't feel like would go to the draft, and he did not, and you definitely did not think he would go into the transfer portal. But in this era of the transfer portal, no player is safe on your roster. Anybody can leave at any given time, and Tramon Marks is a perfect example of that. And going to Arkansas, this is a huge addition for Eric Musselman because looking at what Eric Musselman has done, he has done a great job year in and year out of bringing in transfers and having a lot of success at Arkansas. You look at what he did with Ricky Council. You look at what he did with Justin Smith and so many other players. Now he's bringing in Keon Minifield from Washington this offseason already that I mentioned in my last transfer portal update video, and now you're bringing in Tramon Marks. I think this is going to really help Arkansas be able to not feel the effect as much of Nick Smith and Anthony Black going to the draft. Those are both tough losses for Arkansas, but now you're going to be able to bring in Keon Minifield and Tramon Marks, and Tramon Marks is a really solid guard. He can shoot the three ball. It's not his biggest strength in the world. He is more of a downhill guard, but he can shoot the three, and he's just a solid player overall. Really tough loss for Kelvin Sampson, but Kelvin Sampson has done a really good job of being able to replace replaced that talent so far, and I do think that Tramon Marks will be a great addition for the Arkansas Razorbacks and Eric Musselman and keep the Razorbacks toward the top of the SEC. Now, another transfer portal addition, some of these happening on Easter, you had Jayden Epps, the former Illinois guard, transferring to the Georgetown Hoyas. Now, this is a really interesting move right here. A lot of people will be completely shocked at this. They would say, why is Jayden Epps transferring to Georgetown from Illinois? Illinois is a much better program than Georgetown right now. But Jayden Epps was committed to Providence out of high school, and he decided to decommit, and Ed Cooley was at Providence. Well, now Ed Cooley's at Georgetown, so it makes a lot more sense. Illinois is having a lot of roster flux right now. Scott Clark left the program, so I don't know if there's something going on there with Illinois, just a lot of roster turnover. I don't think a lot of players are satisfied there, so maybe it's Brad Underwood has some things to get figured out with the Illini. But Jayden Epps is a solid player. He's 6'2", and I think he'll be able to replace what Georgetown's losing in Primo Spears and Brandon Murray as well to the transfer portal. Georgetown needs a lot of talent infusion into the program, and I think that this addition for Ed Cooley is a really solid addition for him in the program because Georgetown needs all the talent they can get. They need any player that they can get into the program, and I think that Jayden Epps, while not a player that's going to be able to lead Georgetown out of the 8-23 record that they had last year to the NCAA tournament, he is a building block player that could potentially help other players want to transfer to Georgetown as well to get the Hoyas to the NCAA tournament maybe in the future. Another big transfer portal addition is Damian Dunn, who is a 6'5" guard that's transferring from the Temple Owls to the Houston Cougars. And you talk about Tramon Marks transferring from Houston to Arkansas. Now, what did Kelvin Sampson do? He just replaced Tramon Marks with Damian Dunn, a 6'5" guard that can shoot threes. And Damian Dunn averaged 15 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. And while that was at Temple in the American Conference, he's played against Houston before. Houston was in the American Conference as well. And now Houston's going to the Big 12. That will be a big step up, and I think that Damian Dunn will have to be able to adjust to that level of play. But Tramon Marks only averaged 10 points per game. If Damian Dunn averages anywhere between 8 to 10 points per game, he's essentially replacing Tramon Marks. I know they're not completely the exact same player. They're a little bit different, but I think that Damian Dunn just goes to show his transfer addition to Kelvin Sampson in Houston is going to show that Houston is going to continue to be competitive. They're going to stay toward the top of college basketball as long as Kelvin Sampson's there. He's done a fantastic job bringing in transfer portal players and getting players like L.J. Cryer and Damian Dunn to be able to replace what they're losing this offseason is huge for the Houston Cougars and their future success as a program. Now, to move on to some smaller transfer portal additions, because those were just some of the big ones, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more transfer portal additions in the future, but Keshawn Gilbert, he's a really solid player that's going to be transferring to the Iowa State Cyclones. He played for UNLV the past 2 seasons. He's a 6'4" guard, and he's averaging 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game for UNLV this past season, and now he's transferring to Iowa State to reunite with TJ Otzelberger. He never got to be under him as a head coach because TJ Otzelberger left UNLV to go to Iowa State, but he was recruited by TJ Otzelberger at UNLV, never got to play under him. But now Keshawn Gilbert's going to be able to play at Iowa State, and TJ Otzelberger's done a fantastic job with a bunch of transfers in the last 2 years for Iowa State. You look at Jaron Holmes, you look at Gabe Kalsher, tons of players. I think that this is a great addition for Iowa State and should really help the Cyclones maybe stay in the hunt for an NCAA tournament berth next season. Another big transfer portal addition is Denver Anglin, a 6'1" guard who's transferring from Georgetown to SMU. He's a former 4-star recruit, and he only averaged 1 point per game for Georgetown this past season, but SMU needs all the help they can get as a program since they lost Kendrick Davis to Memphis last year, and SMU was really awful last season, so getting a former 4-star recruit, even if he doesn't have a lot of experience, I think it's going to be huge for the SMU program to at least try to get some stability and maybe get the Mustangs closer and closer to being a tournament team again. Another transfer portal addition is Devontae Gaines, who's transferring from George Mason to Providence. He's a 6'7" forward who averages 7 points and 6 rebounds per game last season. This is an easy addition going from George Mason to Providence because Kim English was the George Mason head coach. Now he's going to Providence following his former head coach. You see that a lot of these transfer portal players, they do that when they have a connection with a coach that they're not currently at. They end up transferring to that coach in that school. I think that this is a good addition for Providence overall. I don't think it's going to be able to potentially move the needle and maybe keep Providence toward the top of the Big East. I do think that Kim English has his work cut out for him at Providence, but you do look at players like Bryce Hopkins returning to Providence. I think that does instill faith that Providence could make the tournament next season, and Devontae Gaines could be a decent role player that helps the Friars make the tournament next season. So I think that's a good addition overall. Denver Jones is a 6'4" guard transferring from FIU to Auburn, and he averaged 20 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists this past season. You can't expect him to average 20 points per game at Auburn. That's ridiculous, but he averaged 20 points per game at FIU, so he's a bucket getter. And I think that Bruce Pearl realized realizes that his team needs an infusion of offensive talent, offensive ability to be able to have a player that can just get a bucket whenever he wants to. Auburn has really struggled at that the last couple years, ever since they had that team that went all the way to the Final Four that had a bunch of players that could shoot the basketball. I think that Denver Jones absolutely provides that for Bruce Pearl. Is he going to be a player that helps propel Auburn back to the top of the SEC? Probably not, but he's definitely going to be a player that will help out the program next season and maybe provide better guard play than what the Auburn Tigers have been getting very recently. Another big addition in the transfer portal is Jamil Reynolds, a 6'10" forward that's transferring from the Temple Owls to the Cincinnati Bearcats. Jamil Reynolds, I think overall, is a solid addition for Cincinnati. He should help out their front court that has had some struggles the past couple seasons. I think overall that's a good addition for Cincinnati. And now down to our last couple of transfer portal additions in the last few days. Dontrez Styles, a 6'6" wing who averaged 1 point per game for the UNC Tar Heels last season. He's transferring to Georgetown as well. A lot of North Carolina fans are happy he's not transferring to NC State. You never want your former player to transfer to a rival team, especially in the same conference. So North Carolina fans breathe a sigh of relief there. And Dontrez Styles going to Georgetown again. This is just a depth piece here for Ed Cooley overall, getting any player that he can get that has the potential of talent. Dontrez Styles was a former 4-star recruit. He hasn't shown it yet in college so far, but if he can finally get some playing time that he wasn't getting at North Carolina and have some success at Georgetown, maybe average 7 to 8 points per game next season, he could really help out the Georgetown Hoyas and maybe make them competitive in the Big East next season to be able to help Ed Cooley get the Hoyas off the doormat of the Big East Conference, and maybe Dontrez Styles will be able to pair up with Jayden Epps and create something special for the Hoyas next season. And a couple of days ago, Caleb Mills, a 6'5" guard from the Florida State Seminoles, transferred to the Memphis Tigers. He averaged 13 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game for Florida State this past season, and he's transferring to Memphis. And now that Houston's going to the Big 12, I think potentially Memphis could be the best team in the American Conference next season. Penny Hardaway's done a really good job in the transfer portal bringing in players. Caleb Mills, he does struggle to shoot the basketball, but he's a solid guard overall. He's a pretty solid passer, and Caleb Mills definitely wanted to go off of a losing basketball team in Florida State to be able to have some success, and Memphis has had a lot of success the past few seasons, and Memphis unfortunately had a quick exit in the NCAA tournament this past season to Florida Atlantic, so maybe with Caleb Mills, maybe Memphis will be a bit better of a basketball team next season that's more capable of making a deeper run in the tournament next season, because Memphis was a good team last year, but unfortunately they were eliminated early in the tournament. But I do think Memphis, now with Caleb Mills' addition, could potentially be the best team in the American Conference next season now that Houston is gone, and a very good solid portal addition for Penny Hardaway yet again. And the last player on this list who transferred 3 days ago, you had Koweisi Reeves, a 6'6" guard who's transferring from the Florida Gators to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. He averaged 8.5 points per game and 2.6 rebounds per game. He was a former 5-star recruit. He has a lot of talent, and he showed it at times with Florida, but he's not a very good three-point shooter. He needs to work on that part of his game, and I think if he can at Georgia Tech, he could still be a really good player that makes the NBA eventually. But Damon Stoudemire, this is a big addition for him. This is his first season as the Georgia Tech head coach coming into this year, and getting a player like Koweisi Reeves really shows that Georgia Tech's trying to have success in college basketball, and Koweisi Reeves could really help out Damon Stoudemire in year one. And I think with Damon Stoudemire getting this transfer portal addition, maybe he can bring in a couple other really solid players as well in the portal, and maybe make Georgia Tech competitive in the ACC in year one, especially with a lot of teams in the ACC having been struggling lately. But overall, I do think that Georgia Tech is still a little bit away from the NCAA tournament, but you never know. Maybe another good player or two to pair along with Koweisi Reeves, and maybe Damon Stoudemire has something building with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. But I do think Koweisi Reeves, this is a good move for him and for Georgia Tech to potentially help the Yellow Jackets have some success and maybe give Koweisi Reeves a chance to really shine at a program that needs a player of his talent and capability. Now that is the transfer portal update of April 10th. So many portal additions are going on, and it's going to keep continuing to happen in college basketball. More players are going to enter the portal. There's still fantastic players like Hunter Dickinson in the transfer portal, and Khalil Ware, and so many other basketball players. It's going to be really interesting to see where all these players end up. But comment down below what you think about all of these transfer portal additions that I just mentioned on this list. Which player you think is going to help which team the most? Which transfer portal addition was the most surprising to you? And overall, what you think about the transfer portal this year as a whole. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.